At the far end of Bretforton stands a grand house set behind iron gates and overgrown hedges. Its windows are shuttered now. The roof sags and ivy curls along the eaves. But beyond the manor's crumbling face lies a garden, one you'll not find on any map. This is the story of secrets, solitude, and soil that does not rest. The walled garden of Bretforton Manor. It was said that the garden never grew right. Even in summer, when the rest of the Cotswolds bloomed with roses and lavender, the patch behind Bretforton Manor stayed pale and choked, overrun with yellowing vines and brittle stems that never flowered. Children whispered stories of dead soil and buried bones, of strange figures glimpsed between the gaps in the brickwork, of a voice, low, urgent, heard just beyond the ivy-covered walls saying, "Don't go in," but to most, it was just a garden. An old one, walled in, fenced off, and forgotten. Until Mr. Ashcroft came to stay. Ashcroft was not a local man. He'd inherited the house from a cousin he'd never met, a distant relative, one of those sudden windfalls that arrive with too much paperwork and the vague smell of old money. He was a painter, quiet, well-read, looking, as he put it, to find stillness. And he found it, in spades. The manor was large, drafty, and filled with the detritus of generations. Paintings hung crooked on the walls, dust curled around porcelain figurines. The upstairs bedroom smelled of mothballs and dried rose petals, but it was the garden that caught his attention. He first noticed it from the study window, a circular patch of lawn hemmed in by tall brick walls, with a single iron gate set into the far side. The trees around it grew thick, pressing inwards, as if trying to claim the garden for themselves. No flowers, no benches, just an old sundial in the center, and earth that looked heavy. He asked the housekeeper about it, a local woman named Mrs. Kettle. She pressed her lips together. "Best leave it, sir." "Why?" She wiped her hands on her apron. "Things don't stay buried there." Ashcroft assumed it was nonsense, local superstition, village gossip, but he couldn't stop looking at it. The way the shadows fell in odd directions, the way the birds seemed to avoid flying over, the way the gate, though rusted, was never locked. On the 5th day he went in, the garden was colder than the rest of the grounds. There was no breeze, but the leaves in the corners shivered. No birdsong, only the soft crackle of weeds underfoot. The sundial was engraved with Latin too worn to read. The earth smelled sour. Still, Ashcroft was a painter. He saw the aesthetic in decay. He set up an easel, made sketches, shadows against the wall, the shapes of trees pressing from the other side. And then he began to paint. The first work was subtle, a study of shade and form, but when he showed it to Mrs. Kettle, she turned pale. "You've put something in it," she whispered. He frowned. "It's just the garden." "No, sir, look here." She pointed to the background, the dark edge where the ivy hung heaviest. There, half obscured, was a shape, long, thin, robed. A man? "I didn't paint that." That night he dreamed of the garden. He stood at its center, alone. As the wind rose, the sundial turned backwards, the walls pressed in. And a voice, low, ragged, whispered, "Dig." He woke with his hands clenched, fingernails full of soil. He didn't tell Mrs. Kettle, but he returned to the garden in daylight. He brought a spade. He dug. The first layer was dry, brittle roots and stones, then older soil, heavier, deeper still. Something strange. Patches of scorched earth, as if fire had burned deep into the ground, and then he found the bones. Small at first, a fingertip, brittle and yellow, then larger, a rib cage, a jawbone, teeth still fixed, and lower still, a rusted chain. The remains of shackles, the links fused with time and rust. He dropped the spade, backed away. That night, the manor creaked. Ashcroft sat in the study, staring at the half-finished canvas. The figure in the ivy was clearer now, defined, watching. And then the lights flickered, a coldness behind him. In the reflection of the window he saw a figure, tall, robed, standing in the doorway. But when he turned, the room was empty. Mrs. Kettle found him in the morning, still at the desk, pale and trembling. He said nothing, just pointed to the garden. She knew, of course. The story was old. The walled garden had once been a punishment ground, a place where the manor's cruelest ancestor, Sir Edmund Dorrington, had held his private court. Servants were tried for petty offences, theft, disobedience, insolence, and buried where they fell, sometimes alive. One servant, a young gardener, had been accused of poisoning the roses, a ridiculous claim born of paranoia. He was taken to the garden, chained, and left to die beneath the sundial. They say he cursed the ground with his last breath, and from that day on, nothing would grow there. Ashcroft didn't paint again, but he stayed in the house. He kept the doors locked, the curtains drawn, and sometimes, late at night, Mrs. Kettle would hear him pacing the garden. One morning, she found the easel standing alone at the center of the lawn. On the canvas, a single image. A man digging, a shadow behind him, and eyes in the ivy. Ashcroft was never seen again. The walled garden still stands behind Bretforton Manor. The gate is overgrown now, the sundial cracked, but the ground still shifts from time to time, and if you listen on a windless night, you might just hear a whisper behind the ivy.